Welcome to Spectral Shadows. This is the place where the stories don't just haunt your mind, they follow you into the dark. Before the whispers begin, tell me, where are you watching from and what time is it? Midnight? Or closer to the hour when shadows move on their own? If you're brave enough to continue, prove it. Like this video, subscribe to Spectral Shadows and leave a comment with your time and location, so we'll know exactly where to find you. Now, let's open the door to tonight's nightmare. Story number 1. It was a year ago next week when I got a call back from my manager, Ted, saying that I had gotten an interview to work at my large regional hospital here in Utah. In honor of my 1-year anniversary at work, I thought I would share one of my creepier security calls with you all. Our no sleep, a call I received on my second day on the job. I was, and still am, a student at a large university. And being a poor ramen almost every meal college student, it was a dream come true when my roommate, a nursing student, called me about an opening at the hospital he had just learned of. I was doing everything in my power to come out of college debt-free, but a college education is pretty expensive, and my flight school of choice to become a commercial pilot is going to run me about $80,000 more. Needless to say, I was looking for a few jobs to help me along. My interview went about as well as I could have hoped. The interview was conducted by a retired police officer named Ted, a grandpa whose warm eyes and jolly temperament were comforting. I was asked about my academics, work history, which included a short time with my university's police force, and I was run through a physical fitness test and scenarios gauging how I would react. After being told that I had passed their interview and got the job, I remember asking lightheartedly how a job that paid $15.32 per hour and covered weekends could be vacant for a few months. My question was cut off by a sudden change in atmosphere, as if someone had suddenly opened a window to the cold, frozen air outside. Oh, one more thing, you cavalier rig. You don't believe in ghosts, do you? My chuckle and smile faded from my mouth as a laid-back Ted, who had done my interview with complete relaxation and ease, was now staring at me seriously. All previous warmth had been replaced by the grizzled scowl of a retired cop. I felt my blood begin to slowly ice over as the fear from this seemingly random question caught me off guard. My mind raced to make sense of my world as I processed the question. Did he just ask me if I think ghosts are real? What the hell? The question itself was strange enough. But why was Ted so tense? Why did he look almost angry isn't the right word. Disturbed. Maybe. But why was he so forward with asking such a seemingly unprofessional thing? No, I don't, sir. Are you sure? He repeated himself with even more sternness than his original question. Yes, Ted, I am sure. Okay then, you've got the job. I'll see you Friday night. My shiny black boots clacked down the fake wood flooring of the hospital as I made my rounds. My metal badge felt heavy on my uniform as my radio earpiece kept getting caught on its edges. I looked pretty good, if I do say so myself. My radio, keys, and taser all hung off on the right side of my utility belt, as my work phone and flashlight hung off my left. This was my second day on the job, and my first day walking around the hospital by myself. The night before, Friday, I had been guided around by Devin, a senior security officer, who had shown me around the winding and twisting halls of the hospital. Now, with Devin responding to an emergency helicopter landing out on the helipad, I was left alone to navigate the labyrinth. It was approximately 2:15 a.m. when the phone's tone blared to life at full blast, snapping my eyelids to attention. I'd been sitting at my desk with the plasma screens displaying countless feeds from interior and exterior security cameras when I had started to doze off slightly. I answered the phone in the most official tone I could muster, trying to hide any sleepiness in my voice. "Security, how can I help you?" "Hello? You have reached hospital security. Do you need help? Hello? Can you hear me?" My manner shifted from urgency to mild annoyance at the thought of getting a pocket dial from a nurse's work phone. All I could hear was silence and ambient static on the other end. No indication that someone needed my help. I looked at the in-house phone number and was instantly confused. 72493. The 7 at the front of the number means that it's a landline. I thought to myself as I cupped the phone with my shoulder and ear, looking through my notepad. Just as my mind began to falter in making sense of the situation, I heard a faint voice of what sounded like an elderly woman over the line. "Hello?" "Oh, hello. Sorry, I'm a little new and I couldn't hear you. This is hospital security. How can I help you?" "Where am I?" Huh? "Ma'am, are you lost? How can I help you?" "It's cold, and I don't know where I am. Please, come help me." I heard the soft click of the line being hung up. While I was confused, I wasn't without sense of the situation. I had been briefed that since this was a hospital, we often had a lot of old, senile inpatients, patients that stay overnight at the hospital, who would sometimes get out of their beds and wander, thus getting lost. While in most of these situations it would be a nurse or tech calling me about a missing patient and calling an adult code pink, hospital code for a missing patient, the landline phones, if picked up, would automatically begin dialing security if no buttons were pressed for a few seconds. All the landline phones in the hospital did this, and they were all marked as such. It was not out of the realm of possibility that an elderly woman had gotten lost and called me. I looked up on my interactive map where line 72493 was, and it gave me a location: South Tower, 2nd floor, room 5. I jogged down the halls to the elevator of the South Tower, determined I was going to find whoever had called me. I came out of the elevator and rounded the corner. I stood in shock as I read the plaque on the door near the number 5. Morgue. Employee clearance required. Red flags and warning alarms were going off in my head. How could a patient have gotten into the morgue? The doors need a badge scan to get in. How could she have gotten in? I felt my heart rate climbing as I recalled that the elderly woman on the phone mentioned something about being cold. I shuddered at the thought, but I scanned my badge and entered the dark room. I'd be damned if I was going to lose my job because an old lady got lost, called me, and I didn't do anything about it. The door gave a loud click as I walked into the dark morgue. The hum of the large silver freezers to my left filled the silent room with an ominous electric noise. The small circle of my flashlight illuminated the room as I attempted to find the switch to turn on the lights, but to no avail. The light reflected off the sterile steel autopsy tables in the middle of the room, causing long shadows to distort themselves on the walls. My boots made a betrayingly loud smack as I walked on the tile toward the doctor's office where I assumed the phone would be. On the right, shelves and racks of jars of liquid, and what I can only imagine to be samples, lined the wall, giving off a sickly smell of formaldehyde. As I approached the closed door to the doctor's office and autopsy record room, I noticed a faint glow of light coming from under the door. A shadow moved across the room, back and forth in a slow, yet sporadic way. As I could tell, there was someone moving inside. My patient. I knocked on the door only to see the shadow move closer to it, almost completely obstructing the light from the office. "Hospital security, please open the door. Where am I?" The female voice from earlier replied back, in the same quiet tone as on the phone. "Ma'am, you're in a secure part of the hospital. I'm here to take you back to your room. Your nurse will want to see you," I replied warmly, to help ease some of the fears she had no doubt been feeling. Suddenly, darkness engulfed the bottom of the door as I heard a loud thump on the floor in the other room. As adrenaline pumping through my veins, I pressed the red emergency button on my radio, which instantly connected me to the hospital dispatch PBX operator, to which I called for a rapid response to the South Tower, Floor 2, Room 5, for a possible cardiac arrest. I ripped the radio off my belt to get to my keys as it blasted 5 loud chirps. That meant help was on the way. I placed my flashlight on the cold autopsy table, the light facing the door, as I fumbled with my keys to unlock it. As I jammed the master key into the lock, I turned it hard as the tumbler gave way to the force. I slammed the handle down, nearly ripping the door off its hinges, to find nothing. There was absolutely nobody in the room, and the soft glow of the room was not from the light, but from the computer screen in the corner, which glowed a soft blue from the Windows 10 login screen. I walked in, my back bathed in the light from my flashlight on the table behind me. Seeing if she had crawled further into the room behind one of the 2 cubicles in the room, only to find it empty. The cold, still air filled with silence as my radio went quiet after giving off its confirmation that help was on the way. Click. Suddenly, the room went dark, as I heard my flashlight being turned off in the other room. The room was so still and quiet in that moment that not even the freezer's hum could silence my deafening heartbeat. I swung around, liquid fear coursing through my body as I backed up to the wall, drawing my taser and flicking the on switch as the battery charged my weapon to life. I didn't know what was in the main room of the morgue, but there was something there. The computer's soft glow illuminated the pure horror in front of me. The outline of a shadow figure as it glided close to the door silently, facing toward me. The figure was smaller, maybe 5'6", and had completely trapped me in the small office. Seeing the small green, ready light on the display of my taser, I pressed the arc button, which sent a current down the metallic prongs on my weapon, lighting the wall with a white glow. In those brief few seconds, I saw the figure illuminated, a pasty white woman with dark holes for eyes, standing barefoot in a hospital gown. I screamed as the figure seemingly lurched forward in a falling motion, causing me to drop down and climb under the computer desk for protection, where I blacked out. I woke up the next morning in a hospital bed, with Ted sitting beside me, the clock reading 7:30 a.m. He looked at me with sad eyes as tears began to roll down my cheeks. Ted sat up and pulled his chair closer to me, calmly asking, "Did you see her?" I relayed my whole story to him as he calmly sat and listened, never interrupting. After my story, he took a deep sigh and explained that 30 years ago, an older woman with dementia had blinded herself and claimed a demon in the hospital had attempted to enter her body. When she died of a heart attack a few months later, the doctors in the morgue claimed that her body began to decompose rapidly, even in the freezer, and that strange sounds could be heard in the machine. And later, in the building itself, Ted told me that the hospital's cardiac rapid response team had found me up there, passed out, to which they brought me to the ER, where they admitted me to the hospital. Ted reluctantly told me that every so often we get a call from the phone up in the morgue between 11 o'clock p.m. and 4 o'clock a.m. that we are under no circumstances to answer, and that Devin should have told me. Because the occurrence is just so unorthodox, no official reports are ever filed. When we see, hear, or receive calls or reports about her from other staff members, Despite seriously considering quitting that day, I decided to stick with it and stay strong. The hours are still good, and the pay is great. Now, as I look at my past year working here at the hospital, I can honestly say it's not too bad. No sleep. I have seen that entity twice since then, but now I can honestly say that I'm not scared anymore. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm getting a security call, and it's from line 72493. Story number 2. I like spooky stories and creepypasta as much as the next person, but I'll be honest, I don't believe in any of this stuff, and I'm sure there's some explanation for what happened to me. I've read about events like the one I'm about to tell you, but I'm sure it's the result of kids being weird kids and people's overactive imaginations. But it happened, and embarrassingly, I'm scared out of my mind. Regardless of all my skepticism, I hope you guys can help me understand this. I have a pretty odd sleep schedule sometimes, and I had been sick yesterday, so I went to bed fairly early and ended up waking around 4 o'clock in the morning. I was hungry, but I haven't done any grocery shopping lately, so I decided to wait for Starbucks to open at 5:30. I went on Reddit for a while. The subreddit I mod is trending today. Played with my cat, got dressed, and left at about 5:45. It was still dark out, and I checked the weather just before I left the house. It was chilly, around 9 to 10 degrees Celsius, and there was a fog warning with low visibility. To my surprise, when I walked out the front door, I was met with a breathtakingly clear pre-dawn sky. I live near the downtown of a mid-sized city, but I could see stars that I hadn't noticed since moving out of the suburbs. I really like observational astronomy, so I walked with my head up, smoking a cigarette and spotting planets. I passed by a gap in some buildings that allowed me to see closer to the horizon, and I had just noticed the morning star, Venus, when I almost ran straight into a girl standing in front of me. She was taller than me, about 5'4", and very slender. I would say she was between 12 and 14 years old. She was wearing a thin white turtleneck and skinny jeans. She was lit from behind by the window of a convenience store, so I couldn't see her face too well, but I could see that she had medium brown skin and a whole lot of curly black hair. As I stopped short, a couple of inches in front of her, and quickly apologized, she didn't move or look at me. She appeared to be gazing off into the distance across the street. If she had been older, I would have written it off as weird and continued on my way. But I get worried about kids very easily. It wasn't even 6 a.m., and this young girl was out alone, and not really dressed for the weather either. I started to feel nervous. The girl looked fine, clean and whatnot, but her demeanor was so odd I was beginning to think she might have been attacked or run away from a party gone wrong. I opened my mouth to ask if she was okay, but before I could say anything, she spoke, still not looking at me. "I think I'm lost." She paused for a few seconds before turning her head and looking into my eyes. "Can I come home with you and use your bathroom?" As soon as she looked at me, I felt the bottom drop out of my stomach. I feel so stupid saying this, but there was something wrong with her eyes. She was still partially in shadow, so I tried to rationalize that it was a trick of the light. But as I looked back at her, I couldn't deny that there was nothing there. They were black, but it was worse than that. They looked like pits, as though her eyelids opened into a black void inside her skull. Still, she was a child, and I still hadn't had my coffee. And stuff like this doesn't really happen, right? It's just crazy people and tail spinners on the internet. I swallowed my fear and tried to smile. "I'm on my way to Starbucks. They have a bathroom there, so why don't you follow me?" It was as though she hadn't heard me. Her expression didn't change. She just kept staring at me with those empty eyes. "I need to use the bathroom," she repeated. "I'm lost, and I don't have any money. Please help me." Nothing about her face looked scared or pleading. She was completely blank. "I can buy you a drink," I offered. No reply. "Come on, why don't we go somewhere warm and I can call your parents?" At this point, I was shaking with fear. I felt ridiculous and frustrated, and I just wanted to run home and cry. But no way was I letting her see where I lived. She looked at me for another beat, then suddenly, as though she'd put on a mask, her face lit up with an angelic, charming smile. Her eyes, though, didn't change. "See you later," she said lightheartedly, and skipped off in the direction I'd come from. "See you later? Jesus, I hope not." I turned and watched her go, but before she was even a block away, she looked back at me, and I knew I had to run. I booked it to Starbucks, knowing I looked insane, but not giving a damn. The scariest part of all, my perfectly valid pumpkin spice latte coupon didn't work. Just kidding. The scariest part was the demonic little girl who promised she'd see me later. Jesus Christ, guys. It's 2.5 hours later, and I'm shaking like a leaf just writing about this. It all seems so silly in the light of day. So why can't I stop being afraid? Story number 3. Ever since the memory of my 5th birthday came back to me, this is the question I've kept asking myself. But I don't have the answer. I suppose I shouldn't be that surprised, given the other stories my grandma told me when I was little. The one about Mr. Long Fingers, for instance, and the secret of the special knock. I really shouldn't be surprised at all. What follows is a memory from the day I turned 5. I must have been repressing that day for years because it's taken weeks of therapy for me to unlock it. "Grandma, will you tell me a story before bed?" She was halfway to the bedroom door when my words stopped her. I didn't want her to go. Grandma had just tucked me in and turned off my bedside lamp, and I suddenly felt afraid. Partly, it was the darkness of my bedroom. The shadows were so thick, I could barely make out my stuffed toys, sitting in a row on top of my dresser. But mainly, it was my new birthday present. The present Grandma had got me. It wasn't my main present. That was the pack of monsters in my pocket toys I'd ripped open downstairs. No, this was an extra present, a secret present. I hated it. Even in the dark, I could see its shadowy outline on my bedside table. The thing gave me the creeps. A story? Well, what kind of story would you like to hear? It was a silly question, because Grandma only ever told me one kind of story. The scary kind. But because I was already a bit freaked out, I said something I wouldn't normally have done. "Nothing too scary, Grandma." Grandma raised her eyebrows at me. "Not too scary?" I shook my head. She leaned over and switched my bedside light back on, then perched at the foot of my bed, smiled down at me. Out of the corner of my eye, I could still see Grandma's present. It was watching me from my bedside table. I did my best to ignore it. "Okay," said Grandma, making herself comfortable. "I think I'll tell you a story about a witch." "Once upon a time," Grandma began, "there was a young woman who lived in a cottage by the sea. She didn't have a care in the world. She went to school, and she painted, and she read adventure books by the fire in the evening. This girl lived with her mother and her grandmother, and they were all very close. She loved her family very much. One day, in the early summer, the girl was coming home from school when she met a boy on the path. She'd never spoken to him before, but she recognized him well enough. He wore the same uniform she did, after all, and she guessed he must be in the year above her at school. "Where are you off to?" said the boy. His shirt was untucked, and he was smoking a cigarette. The girl hesitated. Her mother had told her cigarettes were bad. She'd also told her never to speak to strangers on her way home from school. But then again, thought the girl, was this boy actually a stranger? The headmaster at their school said they were all one big family. If this boy wore the same uniform as her, they couldn't really be strangers, could they? "I'm going home," answered the girl. "My house is along this path." The boy finished his cigarette, then flicked it into the grass. He smiled at the girl. "Before you go home, don't you want to see something cool?" he asked. The girl was curious, but she also knew she couldn't be late. Her mother would worry terribly if she was late, so she thanked the boy and told him she had to be on her way. But just as she'd walked past him, he called out to her again. "It's a puppy," said the boy. "Our dog had a litter of puppies last week, and Dad said I could keep one. It's in this old barn near my house. Don't you want to see the puppy?" Now the girl loved puppies. She'd wanted a dog for as long as she could remember, but her mother always said they couldn't afford one. Right then, she'd have given anything in the world to pet a cute little puppy. When she closed her eyes, she could just picture it. A happy little dog with a big pink tongue and a wagging tail, eager to meet her. The girl paused and looked down the path that led back to her house. She thought about her mother. Then she looked back at the boy, who was smiling at her. Was there really any harm, thought the girl in taking a quick look. So the girl followed the boy, and he led her over a stile and across a big, big field, and they kept going and going until the girl saw a large barn towering in the distance. And she was so excited that she walked as fast as she could, and the boy laughed and walked right along with her. The girl only started to feel nervous when they were right outside the barn. It had taken longer to get there than she'd thought it would, and the sun was a lot lower in the sky now. She was going to be late getting home. Her mother would be worried. She wanted to see the puppy quickly so she could hurry back, but the barn was dark and full of shadows, and she couldn't see any sign of it inside. "It's just over here at the back," whispered the boy as he took her hand and led her into the shadows. "He's going to be so excited to see you." So the girl took his hand and followed him, and even though his palm was sweaty, she held onto it tight because she was suddenly starting to feel afraid. It was only when she heard footsteps and laughter behind her and turned to see two bigger boys emerging from the barn's shadows that the fear inside her turned to terror. When the girl finally got back home, the sun was setting over the ocean, and the sea was the color of blood. The girl made it through the door of the little cottage before she collapsed in a heap in the hallway, crying her eyes out. It was her grandmother who found her like that. Now, the girl's grandmother was very old and very wise. Mother used to tell her that Grandma had lived so long and seen so much that she knew all the world's secrets. When she was little, the girl had been frightened of her grandmother. But now, the old lady took the young woman in her arms, and she comforted her, told the girl her mother was working late, and she wouldn't be home for a while, told the girl she could tell her anything she wanted, and in the hallway of their little cottage, the girl did. She told her grandmother about the boy and the barn and all the horrible things those bigger boys had done to her in the shadows. And her grandmother listened, and she grew very silent and very still. "Come with me," she said. The girl had hardly ever been in her grandmother's room before. When she was little, it always gave her the creeps. Her grandmother had lots of old scary paintings on the walls and strange little statues and carvings on her shelves. But right then, as her grandmother led her to an old wooden chair and sat her down. The girl hardly even noticed them. Her grandmother was speaking to her in a soothing voice, and all she could do was listen. She listened as her grandmother told her that there was a special trick she knew. A trick to protect against evil. A trick to protect her against those horrible boys so that they'd never be able to hurt her again. So that she'd have control of them. As grandmother spoke, she fetched an old wooden box from the bottom of her wardrobe and unlocked it. Inside the box were countless knitted dolls. All of the dolls were the same blank cream color, with no facial features at all, save for the eyes. Every single doll had a pair of eyes that seemed to follow the girl. As grandmother pulled 3 dolls out of the box, she closed her own eyes and began to whisper. The sound made the girl's skin itch, but it didn't last long. Soon her grandmother had lined the dolls up on the carpet, and her eyes were open again. The last thing she pulled from the box were a pair of black knitting needles and some yarn. "Those boys that hurt you, sweetheart," she whispered. "I want you to describe them to me." And although she was still terrified, and although it made her feel sick, the girl did. She described the boys as well as she could remember. She described them as her grandmother went to work with her needles. And finally, with the blood-red sun disappearing below the sea, outside the cottage window, the dolls were finished. The girl's grandmother took the girl by the hands and looked into her eyes. "I want you to keep hold of these dolls, sweetheart," she whispered. "As long as you have possession of them, those boys will never be able to hurt you again. And do you know what? Those boys never did." The girl was sitting in an armchair overlooking the sea when her grandmother burst through the door of the cottage. It was 2 days after they'd made the dolls, and for the first time since she'd met the boy on the pathway, the girl was feeling calm again. She was feeling calm, but her grandmother clearly wasn't. As the girl turned from the window and smiled in greeting, the old woman held a newspaper out to the girl with shaking hands. 3 brothers, tortured and killed in brutal mass slaying, read the headline. "Agatha," whispered her grandmother. "Oh, Agatha, what did you do?" But the girl just kept smiling. She kept smiling as she took her grandmother by the hand and led her upstairs to her bedroom. She kept smiling as she opened her little cupboard and pulled out a cardboard box. And when the old lady cried out in shock and horror as she saw the 3 dolls inside, the girl kept smiling still. "What did you do, Agatha?" whispered her grandmother again. But it was pretty obvious what the girl had done. Each of the dolls had been impaled with at least a dozen sewing pins, all of which had been pushed through their knitted heads. The area below each of their waists had been burned black with a flame. The girl smiled down at her work and took her grandmother's shaking hands in her own. "They won't be hurting anyone now, will they?" she whispered. "You see, sweetheart," said Grandma, as she stood up from my bed and switched off the light. "I gave you one with a happy ending. I lay in the dark, feeling sick. I don't think I'd understood everything Grandma had told me. Not right then, at least. But I'd understood enough. I'd understood enough to know I felt worse now than I had before the story started." "Grandma, wait," I said, my voice stopping her mid-turn. "Isn't your name Agatha?" Grandma looked back at me and smiled. She walked over and leaned down, kissing me on my forehead. "Time to get some sleep, Christopher," she whispered. "And remember, that present I got for you is always there, if you ever need it." She stood up and left my bedroom. I stared after her, but a few moments later my eyes were pulled back to the gift on my bedside table. The knitted doll. It gazed right back at me, its face featureless, save for 2 blank, staring eyes. You've reached the end, but the shadows haven't left you. If this story unsettled you, prove you survived. Like this video, subscribe to Spectral Shadows, and leave a comment with the part that haunted you most. The darkness is always waiting, and so are we. Until next time, don't turn off the lights.